Jeff says we're live.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call a meeting to order. Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jackie, you have the roll. Thank you. Going around the corner. Okay. We'll move on to item C, adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes?
No changes.
I'll take a motion to approve the agenda when you're ready.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the agenda as listed. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Carried. Item D, public input on non-agenda items. Is there anybody signed up who would like to address the board? Is there anybody who would like to reserve time on an agenda item? Okay. We move on to item E, approval of minutes of past meetings. Jackie, anything new there?
Nope.
Otherwise, after you've looked through those, if you haven't already, I'll entertain a motion to approve them.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the past meeting.
Second. We have a motion and second to approve the minutes of the past meetings. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Item F, approval of financial items.
First part is a quick update. I received notice that the instructional support levy expires at the end of 2025. That's something we do every 5 years by board vote. We simply have to provide notice that we're going to levy an additional, I think it's around $350,000. It's part of our general fund. It's part of the already established tax rate, tax levy that we've had for my time here and before. And we utilize those levy dollars for just general fund expenditures, whether it's salaries, books, whatever rolls through the general fund. It is not categorical dollars, so that is nice. So that'll come later this fall, and like I said, that's every 5 years. And then KRP, the district auditor, you can see some email exchanges there, and then a letter that they asked me to send to the state, the Department of Management, to request another extension for last year's audit, and which was denied with no real answer other than to just get it done as soon as possible. So they're working as hard as they can and waiting for a summary report or an initial report that we can discuss. I have not seen anything yet. Then they did reach out to me and tentatively scheduled field work for this year's audit for September 11th through the 15th. So we at least are on their radar for next year's audit as well, but last year's audit's still hanging out there.
Mm-hmm.
That denial was more, they didn't have the statutory authority to
Correct.
give us an extension.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
So that's what I assume as well.
Yeah.
That's why there was really no have to have it done by a certain date. Just you've been given an extension, get it done. So
And like I told a couple of folks, we're not the only school that is in the same boat with the same auditor. So there's other districts that are still waiting for their final report.
three just within our kind of conference area. So it's not just us. So I'll keep you updated as far as I know, as soon as I know. On to the financial reports. This is the time of year where I'm going to give you financials for June 30th and then update as we go. I'll give financials for July at the end of July, and I'll also report back on the end of last year as well, or at the end of this year. A little trying to keep my years straight, but if you take a look at the activities report first, you can see the activity fund has approximately $220,000 in it. So at the end of this fiscal year, Mr. Jorth, Mr. Cruz, and I work together to reconcile negative accounts, things that don't make money within the activity fund, such as probably mock trial or speech. Those successful activities that don't have gates or other things that help them establish revenue. So we do sort of a little rob Peter to pay Paul within the activity fund, but that's why we have donations, and that's why we have the digital board and some other things to help us kind of offset some of those negative accounts. But overall, the activity fund has $220,000 in it. Some of that is, set aside for individual sports that we can't touch, like project funds and those kinds of things. I shouldn't say we can't touch, we try not to touch, but overall, the activity fund is still very healthy. Hot lunch fund is there for you. We discussed that last month. Those balances haven't really changed, so you can see that before you. The student construction fund, you can see that there is no negative balance for June 30th. I had to make an entry, basically borrow for one day. I can't end the year with a negative balance. So save, lent, student construction for one day. I pay back save on July 1st with interest, basically just the market rate of interest. And student construction is again in the negative, and we'll kind of continue that until the house is officially sold off to the new buyers. FFA Farm Fund, $243, not a lot of activity in there right now. And then, of course, our split fund, that will decrease here at the end of July. My next report, you'll see a large chunk of that go down. We're going to use those dollars to fund the HSA that the employees have chosen. And Special Revenue Fund, Management Fund has $211,000. We received sort of a FYI from Lisa Deeren that market rates for insurance, everyone's going up. There's just nothing that we're going to do about that. Values of buildings are going up because construction costs are going up. So if we would have a catastrophe, what it would cost to rebuild. So be prepared for that. She'll report to us in August, and we'll have a bill to pay for that. Physical plant and equipment, playground, save. Those are dollars we've talked about frequently in the past when we're talking about construction projects, so those balances are there before you. And then the last report is the annual treasurer's report. This is the one that you'll see that I'll report on a little bit more going back to June 30th because it has the most dollars awaiting from the state in accruals and dollars that will continue to be expensed for last year out of. The rest of the funds don't have that quite as much. But you can see our cash ended at $3.7 million. So with expenses that came in, our cash, because we couldn't levy any in the last year, I told you that it would kind of end up down equal to last year, or at least closer. And there it is right there. So that's okay. We still are at a very, very good balance in our cash. Revenues over expenditures. We had revenues of about $10 million so far. Remember, that is not all of the revenue for fiscal year 23, so that's why it looks like a negative right now. That will be different when I report next month. And expenditures, the same thing. We're going to have more expenditures to close out the year. So that's what I have. And then the list of bills. I did send out an email later, or I guess it was earlier this afternoon, mid-afternoon, and then I added one more just like a half hour ago, that number 3, and I think it had 4 bills on it. So if you want to take a look at those real quick, and let me know if you have any questions.
Take a look at the cash balance, the year-end numbers.
Do I have some?
I don't know. The year ending for last year and the previous year are identical.
Oh,
And
yep.
there's a typo there.
Probably just didn't transfer over my numbers somewhere in that, so I'll take a look at that, get that back up to you. Yep.
Any more questions for Jackie on any of those items? The additional.
Additional? Yes, mail is coming a little bit later these days, so.
I'll entertain a motion to approve those 3 items when you're ready.
I'll make a motion to approve those financial items as listed.
A second.
Motion and second to approve the financial items as listed. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item G, administrative reports discussion items. First item up, recognition and congratulations to students, staff, and community.
Yeah, added a couple items here this afternoon, kind of summarizing the softball and baseball team seasons. They both came to a conclusion within the last couple weeks. Softball team had a 5-16 overall record. They finished 7th in the Siouxland Conference. Their season ended at Sibley Ocheyedan about a week and a half ago. And then, like the boys, the all-conference, all-district teams will come out once the final Siouxland Conference team has either qualified for the state tournament or been eliminated. So we got West Lyon girls and boys, baseball and softball still playing. So those team recognitions or individual recognitions don't come out until that final team is either qualified for the state tournament or been eliminated. The boys finished 15-11, third in the conference. So congratulations to Coach Poletsky and all the guys. Their season ended with a 1-0 9-inning game a week ago to Unity Christian. Another gem from Reese Vanderzee. Just ran out of pitches. Hit his 110 pitch limit. And then West Lyon scored like 2 batters later. So we want to congratulate all the guys on a successful season, and similarly, their all-conference, district recognition, all-state recognition will come out here in the next couple of weeks. So.
Mr. Jordan. Let's move on to superintendent reports, and we'll start with the presentation from Mr. Allen. Mr. Jordan, you want to introduce?
Yeah, I got Mr. Allen and Sam Callahan here. Mr. Allen and Jeannie Sharp couldn't be here tonight. She's at Lawrence, Kansas with the volleyball girls for team camp. But the two of them have been working with Sam to build a student achievement dashboard. Bill and Jamie participated in a class that Sam put on, and then we've partnered with Sam to kind of take our Iowa assessment data and then our elementary FAST data to build a couple different student achievement dashboards. So I wanted to invite Bill and Sam to present, and I'm just going to turn it over to you, Beth, to these two guys.
Yeah, my name is Sam Callahan. I teach 3rd grade in Sioux Center. I'm also our data specialist. My students call me Mr. Callahan, and I haven't figured out why yet. So if you have any ideas, let me know. I use a tool called Google Looker Studio. And this tool basically takes raw data files like a spreadsheet or a CSV file, and it puts it into a format that's really user-friendly for people. Are there any spreadsheet people out here? Maybe a little bit. Spreadsheets can be hard to look at, right? They can be hard to learn from. So right here, this is a dashboard that shows the same exact information as a spreadsheet, but it's interactive and it's user-friendly. I think they all have the link to it.
Put it in the details.
Perfect. So you can open this up on yours. This operates a lot like a website, so all of us can be interacting with it at the same time. When you're in a spreadsheet together and somebody does something, it changes it for everybody else. But we can all be working on this at the same time. On June 6th, I was here and we had all the high school teachers working on this dashboard simultaneously, all looking at their students in different groups. Hopefully for you guys, this could take the place of a paper packet presentation where you're flipping through pages and pages of charts and graphs to show your different groups and subgroups in central line. So right now we have 3 years of data put in. This is 2021, 22, and 23. You can look at it a whole bunch of different ways. One of the easiest ways to look at is longitudinally for one group of kids. So if you wanted to look at the kids who graduated last year, or let's say this year, 2023, you can click that drop-down menu, click on only 2023, and this will show you the breakdown for the ELA language arts test for this group of kids. It'll show you how many kids took it each year, the breakdown of proficiency. It'll show you average scores down at the bottom as well. There's not labels on here, but if you hover over any of the bars, it'll show you a little bit more detail. All of these graphs are also interactive too. So if you were an English language arts teacher and you wanted to key in on which students were not proficient, you can click on that part of the graph and it'll narrow your focus to just those few students who are not yet proficient. So if I'm an 11th grade language arts teacher, I look at the students who are not proficient in 10th grade, and I immediately know here are a few students who are going to need my support coming into this school year. Likewise, you could look at the advanced section, and you would probably know that these students might be a little bit bored with my everyday content. They might have mastered a lot of it already. I should start thinking of some extensions for these kids. When we get these reports from the state, it is beyond frustrating the format that it's in, because This year for third grade in Sioux Center, we got a 480-page PDF that showed one page for each test that a student took. So if I have a kid in my class whose last name starts with S, I need to scroll through 300 pages of the PDF to find one little page for them and see how they did on the test. There's no way to combine with averages and things like that. Huge weakness on the part of the state because they put all this money into state testing. We need to have better reporting for it. What this essentially solves for teachers is spinning their wheels doing data analysis and then never actually getting to the implementation part or the action planning part. So hopefully next year, across the board at Central Lyon, starting with FAST scores and other tests that are taken at the elementary level, through ISASP tests at the high school level, teachers will be able to spend 5-10 minutes in a meeting looking at the data and then spend the rest of their time making action plans to actually help students. Data analysis doesn't help students at all, but being able to use the data to create an action plan that works is really powerful. And what these tools do for teachers is speeds them through the analysis part and lets them focus on the action planning and implementation part. When teachers see this dashboard, they do have an additional drop-down menu right up here that is for student name. So if you wanted to see a longitudinal report for a specific student, see how they're growing over time, they could have that option. Obviously, since this is a school board meeting, we can't be flashing names up on the screen. They're all replaced with state ID numbers. I suppose if you were really, really ambitious, you could try to figure out what the state ID number matches up with the student name. I'm trusting that all of you have more important things to do with your time, though. Do you have any questions for me about what this tool is, what the purpose of it is, how we're doing it?
Mr. Allen, you want to maybe share a little bit what you guys did on the 6th of June? Mr. Groen, if you want to chime in too. I know you were part of that kind of scavenger hunt.
I guess from a teacher standpoint, some of us that deal with Excel spreadsheets and get all excited about seeing that data, not everyone in this building shares that same enthusiasm. And so this takes, it's crazy. And so what this does is, where maybe I get excited about a set of data and I try to explain it to somebody for 15 or 20 minutes, and it's right there in front of them visually, and they can see it, and they're not necessarily intimidated by it, and yet they can interpret it probably better than had I taken 20 minutes to try to explain it to them. And we're hoping at the high school level that we can expand on this. And like with ISASP, you get English, you get math, you get some science. Then maybe you can start looking at social studies and start implementing data into this same program. And the social studies teachers would then have information that they could look at from year to year, notice growth, notice weaknesses, and make decisions based on that.
So when do you intend to roll this out to staff?
Yep, so we kicked it off that very last day with all of the elementary and secondary teachers. We've got a plan for next year that our teacher leaders that are going to these conferences, we're gonna have a before school meeting, kind of walk through, okay, got a preview of it, here's how you're gonna lead your grade level team, or for Bill, the science team, 7 through 12, and use the data to make the interventions or enrichment activities for the kids based upon what their scores were.
You've used this at Sioux Center? It's going well?
Yep, really well. We just completed a 12-year longitudinal study on some of our standardized tests, and so this only gets more powerful the longer you use it. You can start to see bigger trends, and there have been points in our data set where I look back at things 5 years ago and I think, how did nobody catch this? And think of the things that we could have done if we would have seen this data in real time. Think of the changes that we could have made. And so, yeah, I'm excited to have it in place for Central Lyon because you guys can see those things happening real time. You can know what's working, what's not. Like Bill said, we can expand this to your everyday curriculum, your unit and chapter tests, so that teachers can respond to student needs and student successes and struggles really quickly.
So have we just break down, like, if you're talking science or math or a specific subject, does it break it down by categories within that, or is it just like science total in general? Or
Yes, it does. There is a more detailed report that I've created for Central Lyon. Teachers have not seen that one yet because didn't want to make anybody drink from a fire hose. Right now, the 1-year plan is to kind of get teachers comfortable using just the single scores. Is a student proficient in math? Are they proficient in language arts? And then as teachers get more and more comfortable, they build their data literacy skills, they're used to this platform more, then we can start to add some of those other things. Because yes, on the ISS test, you have depth of knowledge questions and you have different domains of knowledge, but it gets to be a lot of data on one screen if you're looking at all of that. So starting small, taking small wins, and then build from there.
At the elementary level, for example, there's different subtests within the FAST reading assessment. That's the same type of concept, but at that elementary level. And I get that subtest information in there. So if there's a phonics concern for a couple students, we can develop an intervention around that subtest. In addition to just kind of the holistic, are you meeting benchmark or not meeting benchmark?
So we've had access, or maybe I'm not, maybe I'm wrong, to Panorama, which is similar to this, correct?
Mhm.
And so is this in addition, or this replaces, or what's the?
You want to talk about that, Sam?
Yeah, sure. Panorama is a great program. It's really powerful, robust. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it.
Yeah.
But it can be very overwhelming for teachers too.
Okay.
And so to train all of your teachers in using Panorama effectively would be a huge undertaking. And it's very time consuming because there's a lot of navigating that has to be done on the Panorama website. And so what a platform like this does is it boils all the data down to only what's relevant for you to see. And you can get to it quickly. You can filter it however you want within a couple clicks, and you're looking at exactly what you need to do. So this is a faster platform for all of your teachers to be using in their everyday decision making.
Because in Panorama, everything that's like in our GMC database gets filtered into Panorama. Here, we're just looking at FAST, we're just looking at ISAS.
And of course, numbers don't tell you everything you need to know about a student. Attendance records, behavior concerns, all of that stuff is important. But when you have something like this, it reveals the students who are struggling quickly. And then you could start to have those discussions around those few students. Like we've had several students in Sioux Center where their test scores drop during the quarter. Their teacher says, well, yeah, they went to Mexico for 4 weeks this quarter. Like, that explains it. They're doing really well when they're here, but when they're not here, they can't learn. So that's a kid that we don't sound the alarm bells for. It's not an algorithm that, oh, kid didn't score well, we're going to do this. These are still people. It's not dollars and cents and numbers. It's kids.
So I want to thank Sam, Bill, Jamie, who's not here. They've kind of been the leaders in this, and we're hoping to become, like Sam mentioned, more data literate throughout the course of this next year and begin to really give teachers something they can access multiple times a year at their fingertips anytime instead of the couple data days that we've been doing previously.
Any other questions for me? Figure out why my kids call me Mr. Curlahan. Let me know. Thank you.
Right, item number 2 is an update on the bus barn and FFA farm plot. I don't know how much you want to get into this, considering we got to be under new business item number 1, right?
Yeah, I didn't know if you guys wanted to have Patrick. Unfortunately, Matt Basie's not able to join us via Zoom, but Patrick could go through the study. The Buildings and Grounds Committee can kind of have that conversation now, or we can wait till the new business item whenever you.
I think we should just wait till the business item.
Okay.
You okay with that? It's all under one place anyway.
Yeah.
So I just,
Okay.
again, the timeline's there, and we'll talk about it then during the new business.
Okay, number 3, board committees.
Again, not a lot of updating here. I guess I would just note that the Finance Committee, once we do have that final report, we'll get together and review that with the auditor. And then take a look at those policies that are also attached there. Otherwise, I don't have any other reports, feedback from the other committees. Let's others want to chime in.
Okay, the item under old business with the save bond terms will remain tabled until we're ready to discuss that. So I'll bring us into item I, new business. First one is consider site and building type for the new bus barn.
Patrick, can you hear us? Can't hear him. Let me play with my settings here, Patrick. All right, Patrick. There. All right, Patrick, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Can you guys hear him okay? Okay. Patrick, if people just kind of want to maybe follow along with what the documents that I've attached, and you'll find in there the most recent one dated 7/7 is kind of the final report from FEH. Patrick, kind of explaining any of those questions. I'll just kind of preface this, Patrick. When we met about a week and a half ago, you guys presented us with a couple different plan designs for the bus barn that we had discussed back in March. One, a stick-built structure, and the second, a pre-engineered structure based upon the design that we had kind of come to consensus at that work session. And you guys studied the FFA farm property for the feasibility in comparison to the current bus barn property by Kids Club on the east side of Rock Rapids. So if you want to kind of take us through your guys' findings, we can.
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, as Mr. George said, we were looking through those options, and we took several steps, and we're working with, of course, the same group we did for the original design on the existing site, both EDA for engineering of the systems and DPR for site work. So as part of that, we put a survey and a geotechnical soils test. That's part of the process for looking at what is possible. When we looked at that soils, that tells you how much the building needs in terms of taking out soil, bare the foundations on it. It actually came back pretty favorable compared to the site that's existing that you're using now. There was going to need to be a lot of excavation, I think almost twice the amount of what you would be required to do for this new site. So that was one of the steps we took, and that figures into the cost for these two options. When you put this site together as it's been proposed, you'll have approximately 3.5 to 4 acres. And the building that we're proposing is just a little less than 10,000 square feet. I don't know, are you planning to bring up any plans, or are they looking at them on their screen? It'd be good to look at the floor plan if you have it available. Describe it for you in the report there.
It's a part of that report. If you go to, is it page 4?
I believe It's either 5 or 6.
Okay.
Let me look and see.
6.
Page 6 has the floor plan. If you go to that sheet, it's very similar to the design we had previously worked on with you. There are some differences. So it includes 5 drive-through bus bays that can house your entire fleet, as it is now. It includes also a 22-foot wide wash bay, which could also be used for storing buses, and also a small vehicle bay. So that's a little bit of a difference from the other design we had. Similar to the other version, we've got this divided into both 2 pieces, and the thinking behind that is there's a code requirement that basically requires a certain size building to be sprinklered. Well, one way we can make this a little more economical is to divide the building in 2, and therefore you won't have to have sprinklers for the building. So there's a north and a south half. The other difference between those 2 is we propose in our plan here that the south half will be fully heated so that it can be, good for the wash bay. As you also see, there's a location that could be used for some of the light repair that we talked about in the first version. And then in the north half, it could be lightly heated, just so that it's enough to kind of keep it from freezing in winter. That's pretty much the basics of it. There's some of the differences. There's no office space, just a small mechanical room and a single toilet. So it's a little bit of a simpler design, but it is achieving kind of the goal that we set forth in this study. If you want to go also now to the page before this, the site plan. So we, looking at this site, one of the advantages of it is you've got the streets on both sides. Being able to do that pull through, it actually works really conveniently. As part of this, we'll have a 12-foot concrete in front of each side of those, the bus barn. And then beyond that, all the drive will be gravel. You also could include parking if that was part of the design. Of course, these things are all preliminary. We're just showing you what could happen. Should it proceed to full design, we can design whatever we're looking for. Another thing, we discussed this with the building and grounds a week and a half ago, and we want to make sure you guys know too, as far as expansion, there's opportunities to expand this building either as an addition, or there's also room on the site to put a different building on there if that was part of your desire. With the configuration, it's kind of a wedge, somewhat of a wedge shape, so it might slightly change how we're showing it in this plan, but that will be a consideration should it go into the design. This site is where it is a little bit lower than the streets around it. It's 4 feet. So as part of what we would propose would be building up the pad for this building a couple feet, and that'd be to just help make sure that it has good drainage, and so that would be part of the plan that is included in the cost. And then also, there are some issues that are different because this is a little bit on the outskirts or the edge of town. There's some things like utilities that are not quite as close as they are at your current site. So one of those is the sanitary system to get connected to the sewer. So you have a couple options here, and this was a question that the building and grounds team also brought to our attention. Our original proposal has, you would need to connect the sanitary sewer system. To be clear with this proposal we're getting, we've got 2 options. One is to connect directly to the sewer system. It just happens to be about 800 feet to the south. So to do that, you would need a pump just to the south of the wash bay, and then it would be piped to that sewer system. The other option is you can do a septic system for this building. Part of that is we have to do a little more study to know what's possible and the size of that field and locations and things like that. So that would have to be a little bit more, but conservatively it would be a little bit less money, just looking at a rough cost. So that would require a little bit more study to have a better understanding, but that would be another option. So what you see in the final cost estimate shows the sewer connection, but keep in mind this would be another option. And then another item here is the nearest fire hydrant is also about 800 feet away from the property, so it could be an advantage to the district to add some value by putting that fire hydrant. The district would need to pay for the cost to extend that line to have that fire hydrant put in. And so the cost also is included in these numbers, but again, that's an option that you can choose. With these, that specific adding of the fire hydrant, you would still need to do some checking on what the pressure in those pipes are. We designed this based on what we found in the last site, but we would need to do a little bit of research and study to find out what the pressure in the pipes would be. We also have in our report kind of a general what we think the advantages of the site are. As I already mentioned, the over-excavation from the soil is certainly better on this site than we found in the other site. Some of the cost savings that you'll see on this, the fact that we would have had to demolish the existing bus barn, that cost isn't required in this new proposal. And the convenience of being next to the current ag plot may be a benefit to your students too. Some of the disadvantages, just the utilities being a little further away requires that cost that you wouldn't have had to do in the existing site. But there are some options that we're looking into for that, like I said, with the septic. And as far as the two different types of construction that we're looking at, the pre-engineered metal building, it's a pretty convenient system for this type of project because it's a big open space. So it works pretty well. It would be a metal building, would have exposed insulation inside the building, and it could have some cover. Sometimes people put a wallboard or a plywood on the inside. That kind of cost was not included here, but that's an option. Gives it a little bit more durability on the inside. It's just a simpler construction than the masonry or the stick build. The advantages of the stick build would be that a lot of builders are more familiar with it. It's a system everybody probably knows since it's similar to your house. One of the disadvantages of a stick build is it would require columns on an interior. It would be centered in the middle of the building, kind of between where the bus bays are. So those are some of the highlights, and you'll see in the costs, we came up with some numbers that are actually fairly similar to one another. When you get down to it, there's only a difference of about 70,000. Just, of course, looking at this preliminary, based on our best understanding, based on some information from contractors and past projects. So that's kind of the highlights. Any specific questions? Anything you're looking to know more about?
Right, do you have a map that shows what that proposed property swap would look like with the bus barn on it? And what the new farm might look like?
I don't know if do you, Patrick, have a aerial with,
All I can say right now is that site survey, and I've got a Google map. I don't have the actual, visual showing what the exchange of land would be.
So I'm going back to the site plan on page 5. Do any of your drawings give us a total, essentially, width of the proposed bus barn from the south edge of that property to the north end of where the gravel would be?
Hmm?
Yeah, the more the width from north to south.
I can get that very quickly. I believe this. It is 180 feet and 4 inches.
108 feet.
That's a little better.
108 feet from south to north.
Just making sure.
The building is 90. The building is, 92 feet, 8 inches.
Portions of each of
But
those.
that's pretty much room for exchange.
To the south, but to the north.
But if you expand to the north.
Then you're cutting into the FFA farm.
So the skinny piece right now, that's the FFA farm, that's gonna join up with the other piece on the west side.
Yep, so I can,
That's how I,
so if you think about the hairpin, right? So presently, the FFA farm goes from the north end of the hairpin along the Park Boulevard,
Right.
which is the east side of the hairpin. The development group owns
Yep.
the west side of the hairpin. Yep. And so with the land swap, we're swapping essentially the entire trapezoid on the north end. So the school,
can you bring it up? You can.
yep, presently, this is the FFA property, the blue, okay? The development group has this trapezoid. Sorry. Development group has both that piece and this section here. And so the swap essentially divides the property. So the north end of the hairpin, roughly right here, would be the schools. Then this section here would be the development groups. So the proposed swap, the district is gaining a couple acres in use. The FFA property, the bus farm property would be larger than what we currently have, which is the skinny strip along the east side here. I don't know why it's so.
Okay.
So when is that land swap? I mean, I know we talked about it months ago, but it's not final, right? Or
No,
when?
moved it.
Okay.
The maps that we had previously, they're just kind of a rough,
Sure.
and DGR is working on what's called the meets and bounds
Okay.
description. So before we would finalize
Yeah.
anything, we'd have to publish notice and let
I'm just
everybody
curious.
know what's going on. Yep, hold a couple hearings.
And the zoning for that property, there won't be any concerns with how we're using the property, ag related, and
Correct. I
that's all.
talked to both Randy Wagmeister and Steve Avery, and they have told us that we will be able to continue all the ag activities that the FFA has done historically, and the commercial structure of the bus barn would also be appropriate. Both properties are zoned as ag. I'm just gonna stop touching it. I can't get it. You know, everyone's sick now. I'm trying to watch me do that.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Nope. Did you guys have any more questions for Patrick? Any questions for Patrick? We're good? Okay, thanks, Patrick.
No problem.
I'm gonna end our call then, okay?
So the action item here is to consider the site and building type for the new bus barn. Because we have a couple sites we can consider. One of them is the existing site and the FFA property that we just looked at. Along with a couple different building types, so I guess I would ask if the Buildings and Grounds Committee has any recommendations, thoughts in that arena or to share.
My personal, it's kind of surprising that they were actually so close in price. If it was a stick built, would be a little bit cheaper than that, but considering their longevity, the engineer, it's supposed to be longer, have longer life. I would look at pre-engineered. There's still some issues, I think, with the wash bay. Set that up correctly, but that'd be my suggestion.
I guess it's just, I agree with the surprise that they came so close in price. Also, hoping that whichever one we choose, it will go to bed, that it's not such a big discrepancy as before the masonry building. Because before that masonry building was just like a $500,000 difference over the pre-engineered. This price didn't really change. We have a pre-engineered metal.
That they studied
They
originally.
studied that before also, and this is real similar to that.
We only had one bid or two,
Yeah,
right? So hopefully we
Yeah.
can get some more there.
yeah.
So just to confirm, staff is on board, recommends the FFA property.
Yeah, Lane and Steve Bresky were at our Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting, and, just like Patrick kind of detailed, just the two-way entry and exit, but also the safety component for the drivers as they're, leaving and the east side current site, getting onto Highway 9, is a little dangerous. We haven't had any accidents, but this site is more controlled as you're crossing the highway because there's a stoplight there at the intersection of 9 and 75. So, Lane's supportive of that and just some efficiencies out there versus where we're at currently by Kids Club. Anything you guys want to add to that?
Just, I think the main thing that everybody's concerned about, and we want to reiterate, is that FFA farm, as it is right now, shouldn't be affected. They'll be able to do their livestock, and I know they can still farm the west half, the new piece that they can get, versus having that small section along the east end. So I think that's a big concern, is that we keep that intact.
Yep.
You know what the net is on that? Are they gonna gain ground?
I don't know based upon the total acreage or, square foot of this current property, other than the structure itself is about 10,000 square feet.
But anything, if we had to fence in some more areas south of the bus barn, we could do that,
For sure.
right?
I know I read it somewhere, and I don't have it in front of me, but it seems like we're gonna add like 6/10, 7/10 of an acre in total.
To the FFA.
Yeah, here it is, because the approximate size of the district owned lot will be 3.8 acres, and right now, we own 3.1 acres. Is what this study says.
Some of that'll get eaten up by the bus barn, the gravel.
Correct. But hopefully, we'll keep that
Yeah.
at half an acre or so, roughly, if we can.
So right now, we have 3.1. What you're saying, right?
That's what it
Is
says.
we have 3.1, and then is that, not all of that is used for, most of that is used for FFA, but not all of it, or I don't, do they, well, yes, but do they like use it? I mean, it's.
The livestock can graze
So they.
because it's fenced.
Right.
Yep.
And
And
then
then
there's some
there's,
shops.
yep.
Okay.
So like corn's planted this year on the very north end of the property. But we're not obviously using anything on the west side because we don't currently own it.
Oh,
Any other questions, discussion?
Do we have a cost comparison between the two sites? So this, my understanding is this study is purely just the FFA site.
Correct. And so the previous study, I will grab it. And again, this is a year old. Pre-engineered metal building at the previous site was 1.8, or excuse me, 2.89, or excuse me, 2.089, $2,089,000. And we did not study a stick built at the previous site. So here you go, Dave.
So this is about, this is about $100,000 more than that.
You want to take into
Although,
consideration though, that there's
yeah.
about an 8%.
Yeah,
understand.
Yep, understand.
Pricing.
And
This is not apples to apples. I understand.
And that didn't have the
There's also a lot of things in this that are not in this.
correct, and that doesn't account for the over excavation of the soil at the current bus barn property that was discovered when we did the soils test, when we were moving forward with the bid of the masonry building. And so, they have site work here of about $200,000. There was additional costs that were gonna be beyond that $200,000 in this study.
Well, I mean, actually, if you look at the previous study, for site improvements, it says 209.
Yep. And that was before we knew what was actually in the soil.
Oh, okay.
And so there's gonna be additional excavation costs as a result of the rubble foundations from the old school buildings that were previously on that site, that they were gonna have to dig down 8 feet, I believe is what the depth was, to over excavate and then bring in additional rock or to compact the soil to set the foundation for whatever structure we're gonna put there.
So assuming we move forward with the FFA land, do that land swap, the assumption is that we would sell the current property.
Current property at the current bus barn.
Correct.
By Kids Club.
And both potentially to Kids Club, or potentially to, and the other, the building itself and that land around, the immediate land around the building to someone else.
Yep.
Do we have any idea what that's worth at this point, or an estimate of what the value of that would be?
Meeting with Lisa Deeren next week. Talk not only about insurance, but I can get her best estimate for commercial property of the current structure. And I'm also meeting next week with Gary Kurth and Tim Lohman to do the meets and bounds kind of descriptor of those properties. So I don't have that estimate for you right now. Again, this study doesn't account for any sale of the current property that we own
And that sale really isn't gonna happen until,
for a
I
while.
mean, occupancy can't happen until 2025 at least.
Right, because we're gonna want to continue to use that during the construction for the
What we're
storage.
going with this partially is, there's no guarantee it's gonna get sold. We may be sitting on that for who knows how long.
Yep.
No additional money out of our pocket, but
No realized revenues.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note again, even for those in attendance and maybe listening online, that funding for these projects is not coming out of property taxes. Funding is coming out of the save fund.
Correct.
And so there's no impact to property taxes. So that doesn't mean that you don't take a hard look at the numbers and do your due diligence and be a fiduciary with the district's dollars, but won't be any impact there.
It looks to me like the main difference is just in the building itself. So, it's about $400,000, whether it's the pre-engineered steel or whether it's the stick build, it's about the same. Then you've got all of the costs are essentially the same. All the site work, all of the foundation, the plumbing, the mechanical, et cetera, that's all essentially the
The
same.
utilities are,
Right. The one thing I would say with the pre-engineered metal building, and having some experience with that, is, just my personal opinion is, the open insulation is a pain. I would cover it.
Yeah.
Ideally, I'd cover it with steel. So figure that additional cost in here as well.
Even if it's like spray? Like
Well,
spray?
they don't spray foam it. It's,
Oh, they can't spray.
I'm not saying they can't spray foam it. That might be an option. But what I'm familiar with and what Patrick was talking about is it's open insulation. It's like, plastic enclosed insulation is what it is. So so the plastic gets completely sealed off. It's something like a vapor barrier, so it gets completely sealed off. But that's all you have in your interior wall is plastic and insulation.
Right.
That's not very, in my opinion, that's not very good for longevity.
Right, durability, yeah.
So
I would
I would
agree.
look to
yep.
add
And
that
that's-
on.
In my mind, I was thinking spray foam, so I was thinking that's like, solid on the wall almost, like that wouldn't be, I don't know if that's like fire coat, okay, or, whatever, but.
Those are all components of the
Yeah.
continued design process, right? Is weighing those
Yeah.
different elements.
And I think that's an option, especially, on the north end, where we're not necessarily gonna have it heated. But one of the things we talked about is if we wanted to insulate it, and we wanted to at least be above freezing
Yes.
in there. And whether or not, if it's just spray foam, then we might not have to do the inside walls, but especially in that heated area, we definitely finish off.
In the wash bay area, did you talk about doing some form of masonry in there, making a block or anything like that?
To continue discussion.
Okay.
How to get that, because I know with the disadvantages of it, that's a big concern.
Right.
I know Brett and I had that conversation today about why can't we just put a masonry
Structure on that building bay.
on the bay?
We had that same conversation yesterday too.
Maybe much more water.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's also been thrown out there, do you want a separate wash bay building and then have this building? Not saying, it's just an idea thrown out there.
It's an option.
So that's where, this isn't a set, this is the plan,
This is the study.
but,
I
yeah.
mean, the advantage of having it all in one is that then you can, probably more conducive to use it as storage, as a storage bay, when it's not being used as a wash bay, versus having it as a separate building. Then you have to heat that separate building.
Yeah,
I would be in favor of that. Then your cost per square foot, in my
Right.
opinion.
it seems
Yeah,
like
significant.
it would,
Significantly
yeah.
more building.
Agreed.
And it's tough to, we could certainly put masonry on paper, but behind the scenes at that point, well, now you've got a subcontractor that's got to find a mason. And it's been my experience that finding those, as probably evidenced by our first bid, is there are just not many of them around anymore, but the longevity of the building is certainly something to consider.
And again, this is an estimate. Until we go to bid and we drive multiple vendors to the bid, we don't know what the true cost is. And that's what happened to happen last time. So there's still a lot of unknowns.
Any other questions, discussion? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion for the site and the building type. Someone's ready to do that.
I'll make a motion to approve the new bus barn to be out at the big farm pending final swap of the ground. Building.
I'll second.
Okay, should we have a motion and second for the bus barn to be constructed at the FFA site pending the swap with the pre-engineered metal building for construction type? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. On to item 2, consider second lunch meal and second entree price change for the 23-24 school year.
So I want to thank Darsha for coming and apologize that I didn't have all the most accurate information when we set our fees at the last meeting. Unfortunately, we do have to charge for a second meal, and as a part of the packet here, Darsha provided me with some guidance from the Department of Ed in regards to kind of the ratios that we need to maintain with our non-lunch program. And, our costs need to be equivalent to our revenues in that. So if we are not subsidized essentially from the federal government for seconds or adult meals or a la carte, those costs need to be offset by their revenues. And so, Darsha, anything that you want to add or a recommendation for what that charge should be for that second meal?
Well, this was pretty lengthy and pretty detailed, documented several times to understand it, and I still don't know if I understand it fully, but as he said, we can do 3 seconds, but the non-program food costs for seconds and a la carte and adult meals and any non-reimbursable meal cannot be subsidized by program revenue or meals that are subsidized. So, long story short, I did a lot of figuring, and looking at this past year was hard because we had supply chain assistance money and we had some other funds that flowed into the revenue, which aren't going to flow there next year. But my recommendation, long story short, is $3 for a second full meal and $2 for a second entree. And that's based on the average price. I took an average price per meal for about 25 different meals, and it comes to about $1.77 average. And you have to at least cover that. Actually, $2 might be a little outside, but I think we're safe to let our revenue get reduced a little. So My recommendation would be $2 for just an entree, which a lot of people only want the second hamburger or a second piece of pizza or a second crispy. They don't really care about all the other stuff. So essentially, $2 will be most people, and then $3 if they want a full second meal. And I think then we can meet the requirements of the act, or whatever the number of it is, the nonprofit school food service requirement. And I also should add that next year, I think the revenue will go down. I know that when we had our review, she said you have to start thinking about getting your revenue down to a 3-month, have to be able to cover 3 months. And if you get over that, which we are, you need to start working it. So I think the real thing was, if at least we're going in the right direction and we're not still keep going up. So I don't think it has to be like overnight. But that's still $1.15 less than this past year, and $2.15 if they just get an entree. There's higher salaries and wages this year. We talked about updating some equipment, basically having kind of an open checkbook to buy some new small wares while we have the money, buy some extra pots and pans. So that would be my recommendation. Also, not charging for breakfast. There was 11,300 breakfasts served last year, so that will also decrease revenue significantly. So that would be my recommendation to the board.
You're still okay with the free breakfast?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can do that because it's a reimbursable item. So what will happen is we'll put the price into the system at 0, but we can still claim our free and our reduced meals. So we'll get the reimbursable portion of those meals. And even the paid one, it's a small fraction of a paid meal. We also get subsidized, and that's completely fine. I checked with the higher ups, we can do free breakfast.
Remind me what the cost of the full meal is, the first full meal?
$240 for elementary and $250 for high school.
We kept that the same as what we charged this
Which
previous
it
year.
would, yeah, it's not an increase from last year.
So $2.50 for high school.
Mhm.
So
And
here's,
the second entree is $2,
Mhm.
but the full meal is $3.
that's the
I'm
recommendation.
recommending 2 and 3. That's 3 for a whole second meal.
Currently, it's 3,
Or
no, 4.50, 4.15 for a second meal.
That's what it was this previous year.
Yeah, so this will be less.
So the second meal, if you chose to do the second meal, that's actually more than the first one.
If currently, yes.
Because this,
Well, in the new one.
Yeah,
correct. So $2.50 for high school, $2.50, and the second meal would be
Right, because you're still getting reimbursements from the state for even paid meals. I think it's like 70-some cents for lunches right now, during this school year.
so if you qualify for free and reduced meals, your second meal or your second entree is not free or reduced. You have to pay the full price of whatever we set.
And historically, that's been the same as an adult meal, is that
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's typically the same, right?
That's what Joella told me that I was required to do, and I didn't find anything in this documentation, but that's what I had been doing.
It's just been historically what
Yeah.
we've been doing
Yeah.
from previous recommendation.
I think we can be, we're gonna obviously watch our balance
Mhm.
as we begin to kind of eat into that $400,000 essentially savings that we've built up over
Right.
time. And when we continue to work with Dee, we can try to really target in what the ratio is. So if we can go lower than $2 for that second entree or lower than $3 for that second full meal a year from now, in addition to continuing to provide breakfast for free, we'll try to lower it next year. It's just gonna really be something that we track, Jackie, Darsha, and I, over this next year to make sure that we haven't went too far. And if we can go further, we'll make it even less a year from now.
Okay, so we have Darcia's recommendation of $3 for the second meal and $2 for the second entree for next year. Any more discussion on that? Questions? I mean, I know we've already set them as free, but given the circumstances here, I think we'll just do a regular motion and stuff. So if someone's ready to make that motion.
Make a motion to approve those price changes to $3 for the second meal and $2 for the second entree.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second to approve the second meal and second entree prices as recommended by Darcia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Darcia. Then item 3, consider free and reduced price school meal statements.
Again, similar type of concept here. This is what we will publish on the school's website, put in our registration newsletter, communicate with families that if you want to apply for free and reduced lunch meals, how to apply for them, and instructions. And then we'll put it in the newspaper as well. So really formality here based upon what we've already approved. This does not make mention of seconds or second entrees. It's only the breakfast and lunch prices.
Any questions on that? I'll entertain a motion to approve when you're ready.
I'll make a motion to approve the free and reduced meal statement.
A motion and second to approve the free and reduced price school meal statements as listed. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Item 4, items A, B, and C, consider partnerships with Northwest Iowa Community College. Mr. Jorth?
Yep, so A is for the individual enrollments that students essentially register for the dual credit courses. Most of them, our kids take online through NCC. So that's the first agreement. B is the class size kind of billing arrangement. If we have a teacher in our building actually physically teaching a class, much like what Christy Wright does with her intro to education class. So that's that structure. And then the third one is the agreement with the alternative school that's at NCC in Sheldon. Again, in my 4 years here at Central Lyon, we haven't had a student attend, but in the event that we need to utilize that as an option, by approving this agreement, we have that tool in the toolbox.
Any changes to any of the?
Yeah, there's increased, enrollment fees based upon their tuition increases that were approved by their board, and this is just indicating that we're going to face some higher prices.
Questions? So I'll entertain a motion to approve those when you're ready.
I'll make a motion to approve the partnership with Northwest Iowa Community College as listed.
Second. Motion and second to approve the partnerships with Northwest Iowa Community College as listed. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Item 5, consider IASB and RSAI legislative priorities survey feedback, essentially establishing our priorities or recommending what we think the priorities should be for next year.
Correct. So the attachment labeled ISB Legislative Platform 2023 is what I was using to kind of generate our priorities. And so if you kind of flip through there, you can see that kind of the second half of that document starts to number them. And so that's where my recommendations come for. Number 1, our student achievement or a statewide student achievement priority. Number 2, the local accountability and decision making. Number 3, teacher recruitment and licensure. Number 4, school funding policy. And number 5, private school choice. So the first 3 are continuations of what we've had ever since I've been superintendent. The 4th one, slightly different. We've always prioritized supplemental state aid. This school funding policy is a broader set of positions, just about increased flexibility when it comes to using our state aid. A couple different bullet points there, and then obviously the last one is new for us as well, as the ESAs are rolled out and school choice becomes a reality. If we can make sure that that is monitored and the funding for that is held stable as much as possible going forward, and that we need to prioritize public funds for public schools first, and then any of the ESA or continued financial obligations for private school choice are after the public schools have been fully funded.
More discussion? Anybody have any different thoughts on what's listed there? What we did last year? Remind me, can we pick only 5?
Yes.
5. I suppose submit these and see what comes up during the next legislative session and see if we have to change priorities again. Thoughts, discussion? So I'll entertain the motion when you're ready.
Make a motion to recommend those priorities as listed.
I'll second.
A motion and second to recommend the priorities as listed. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Item 6, consider depository institutions and authorized signers.
If you were to look back a year ago, we had our deposits at a $4 million threshold. We're recommending we go to $7 million. Jackie, you want to comment on that?
We should have updated these a few years ago, but we haven't. And that was a note from the auditor last year, but they were here after we'd already approved them, so I let it go. So we're gonna fix things going forward. With the increase in enrollment and state aid and just all the dollars, we ultimately have more than $5.5 to $6 million in one or two of the banks at all times. So we just need to increase those. Typically, it's Frontier, because that's where our general fund is held, but with Save and all the other things, I like to have all of them equal, just in case we need to move monies around, because we do have money markets at each of the other banks as well that house our sinking funds and other things, and CDs. So that is my recommendation.
Do the bond proceeds fall under that?
The bond proceeds fall under the,
But for when we,
If we were to.
right, if we were to move that,
but then I'll move those to Premier, because that's where our sinking fund is at. So, yep.
good.
Yep. That's why I want them all to increase.
Be similar.
So that we have that opportunity. And the signers are the same. That's just usually your board president and myself and Mr.
Questions on that?
Did they say anything about keeping like a large dollar at one bank versus?
A lot of times you're small towns, that's unfortunately just what it is. We have ours just simply because of access with Frontier and historical. That's where I kept my general fund. But I have, like I said, my sinking fund at Premier, which is where my bond proceeds will go as well. And US Bank, because it's not locally owned, I have minimal there.
That's the activity fund
Mhm.
primarily.
Yeah, and that's simply because of a lot more rules and regulations that local has less control over. We did go out for bid, a couple of years ago to all the banks and request money market type bids for our,
Raising rates, should we do that again?
we might, yep.
Are we getting the current market market rate?
Well, I'd have to get you guys a report on what all of our rates are, if you'd like
Okay,
that.
sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm guessing those probably move, right, with the fund or whatever it's at, rather than just like a fixed percentage. More questions on that? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve when you're ready.
I'll make a motion to approve the depository institutions and authorized signers as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and second to consider the depository institutions and authorized signers as listed. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Coon abstains. Make the minutes for it. Okay, we'll move on to item 7. Resignations, we've got 1 and 2 here. We will take these separately since they are somewhat separate issues. The first item with Mr. Rockhill is really a request to be released from his contract rather than a resignation, and then the second one is a resignation. So we'll take the first one first. Mr. Jorth?
Yeah, Mr. Rockhill's resignation was submitted to myself and Mr. Engelman on the 29th of June. I have not had a face-to-face conversation with Mr. Rockhill or a phone conversation, neither has Mr. Engelman. And then I also included his signed contract from April, in addition to our policy 407 on contract release. And so it's my recommendation that we do not accept Mr. Rockhill's resignation. This does not stop Mr. Rockhill from taking a job, leaving Central Lyon and working outside of education. As his resignation letter noted, that's what his plan is to work outside of education. The second component of that is by notifying the Board of Educational Examiners that he continues to be under contract. Mr. Rockhill cannot essentially accept another contract in another school district in our state. If we were to release him from his contract, he could, if he doesn't like doing what he's doing, apply for a job, let's say after Christmas break. Somebody would like to hire him. If we release him from his contract, there's going to be no limitations for him going forward. Again, it's the board's decision. You can release or not release him from his contract. Ultimately, if he's leaving education, there's really nothing that we can do. Our policy states that we can bill him for any of the advertising costs associated with trying to recruit another teacher to take his position. But beyond that, there's really nothing more that we can do to limit him or deny him from leaving as an educator.
So by not accepting his resignation, that then does not release him from his contract. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
If we accept his resignation, that would release him from his contract?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure I.
You're accepting his resignation, releasing him from his contract. And like I said, he can accept a position, teaching position in another district.
Okay, so his contract runs through June 30th, 2024.
Correct.
Okay, so that would be the period where he would not be able to accept another contract, an education contract in Iowa.
Correct. And once that contract
At that point,
expires,
it's beginning next school year, the 2024-25 school year, he could.
correct.
Sure, I understand.
Yep. You've got that correct.
Have you and or Mr. Engelman reached out to the employee?
Yep.
Have they responded?
I have not, like I said, had a phone call or a face-to-face conversation with Mr.
So if he does get released from his contract, then there's nothing to report to the Board of Education, Board of Examiners at that point,
Correct.
right? Because he's free to take a contract in education elsewhere.
Which we definitely would not want to happen very often, if ever, you know, I mean, this isn't an easy thing to have a teacher leave at this time of year.
Yep.
And, I mean, you know, sad to see him go, but, we have a contract that he signed.
And I think I can speak for everybody around the table, we wish him the best of luck in the private industry.
Sure.
Right? But I also look at precedent where, okay, what if something that is not according to our policy unusual and extreme, and we have a elementary or high school teacher that says the day before, you know what? I'm just not interested. Now, we're really stuck at that point. So yeah, I guess I would be in favor of not letting him out of his contract, just from a policy standpoint. But like I said, at the same point, we should wish him the best in his private endeavors. Any discussion, questions, thoughts? So I think the motion then be to reject the request to be released from the
Correct.
contract. You have that motion? I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second to reject the request of Mr. Rockhill to be released from his contract. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Move on to item 2, resignation of Mr. Huesman as the middle school baseball coach.
Yep, you can see Mr. Huesman's email. Prior to the start of the baseball season, Mr. Huesman and I had a conversation. As you all are probably aware of, his wife is pregnant due this fall. They're planning for him to be the daycare provider come next summer for their new child. And so it is my recommendation that we accept that resignation. And he did not sign his 23-24 baseball contract. So we again had that conversation when those contracts were issued in the spring.
Entertain a motion to approve that resignation when you're ready.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the resignation of Mr. Huesman as the middle school baseball coach. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Item J, announcements / dates to remember.
Yes, just want to point out that Family Week or Dead Week is this last full month of, or that last full week of July, the 23rd through the 30th. So will be no activities here at school, no practices, no summer workouts. So that's coming up in a couple weeks. And then we do have in-person registration on Tuesday the 1st. We will open up online registration prior to dead week. So if families want to start registering through JMC, they don't need to show up on the 1st. They don't want to. They want to come and pay their fees and do that in person, they can do that on the 1st. The secretaries will be back full-time in the office on the 31st, that Monday. So if you can't make it on the 1st, we'll have people here. But we're going to try to get as many people registered on the 1st and encourage people to do it online. You don't really need to come in person unless you're a new family. First time that you're registering for your GMC username and password as a family. And then as you can see, we've got our fall activities kind of listed. That starts on the 1st, football starts on the 2nd. And then we have new teacher orientation on the 7th. Cross country starts their practice that day. And then our kind of regularly scheduled second Monday of the month is the 14th of August.
How's the 14th look for everybody?
I'm scheduled to be out of town.
14th through what? And the 15th. Oh, 14th. 21st.
I'm out of town that night.
Would you like that Thursday, like the 17th?
That'll be a full day for you.
That's fine. I mean, it's a full day when it's the regular school year, so I'm totally fine with the Thursday, the 17th. You bet. That's our first day back with teachers for professional development. Again, all staff is here that day, support staff. It's a big day, but
Anything in the evening? No activities in the evening. All right, plus 17th, Thursday, 17th. Good, good. Okay. We're gonna do the 17th. Okay, then we're gonna move on to bill review.